Yeah, good morning and welcome to Aussie Bistro on this beautiful day. This is a series of people looking at setting up a business in Vietnam, and it's something that I'm very passionate about. God knows I've made some mistakes here, I'll tell you. And I've seen people make mistakes and I've seen people be successful. And it really has to do with the amount of work you put into setting up a business here. Vietnam is wanting to attract investment. Australian investment is really important to people. So one of the things we need to have a look at is a number of issues, and we're going to look at regulatory and legal challenges, taxation and accounting, financial and banking challenges, labour and human resource issues, market and cultural challenges, infrastructure and logistics, transparency. I'm not going to use the corruption word because I think it's really improving here. And then I think we're going to look at tips to mitigate challenges. And I'll work on those right now. Hire a reputable local legal and accounting firm. And those two things are very separate, but both are vitally important in how you work. It was a mistake I made when I first got here. The firm was in Ho Chi Minh. They cut corners, they did it cheap. And the agreements that were drawn up for me were far from what I wanted. And because they're a Vietnamese company, it's only in Vietnamese. So trust shouldn't be there when you're starting up a business here in Vietnam. You need to have a look at market consumer behaviour here, and it's something that's very different in every city. Now, one of the things about the legal system here is that every system is basically its own jurisdiction. So if you have a look at what goes on at a local level, I had a business in Ho Chi Minh City. I transferred it to Da Nang. I had to get a release from the Ho Chi Minh Tax Department and be accepted by the Da Nang Tax Department here. So there was a lot of loopholes to actually jump through to get it here. Each of the jurisdictions have their own customs department, their own tax department, their own immigration department. So they're all separate from all the different parts of the country. People who get married here often have to go back to their partner's hometown to get married. They can't get married everywhere in Vietnam. I'm having to go through some complex visa issues at the moment, and it requires me to leave the country and come back. So all those things need to be taken into consideration. Important in all this is this local partnerships and networks. Look, that's one of the great things that AusCham does. AmCham, wherever you're with, we hold local meetings, meetings in Ho Chi Minh, meetings in Hanoi, and the work that is done by AusCham is second to none. It's why I like to be a board member of that organisation, and why I like to be the board member in Da Nang, because there's none other. And I've been fighting for Da Nang and representation here. One of the things we don't have in Da Nang is actually consular. I had an incident a few weeks ago where someone got into severe legal issues, and getting consular help was really difficult. You need to stay updated on regulations and tax changes, because they do change, and Vietnam is trying to make its economy more acceptable to overseas and foreign investment, and they're working really hard at it, and they're a good government trying to do things that are good for the society here. The other thing is robust HR systems. I've never signed so many pieces of paper in my entire life than what happens here. The contracts are so detailed, and it's quite amazing. So we're going to do this whole thing in a couple of stages. So what we'll have a look at first is what we talked about, and that's the regulatory and legal challenges. We just talked about the complex legal bureaucracy. Business registration and licensing. You just can't do any business. You've got to be licensed to do that business. excuse me, and approvals can be time consuming, and there's lots and lots of central government and local authority bits you've got to go through. I remember there's a couple of blokes I talked to about starting a business here. I said, go and see a local solicitor, get it done properly. They didn't do it. They set up a business, they're in trouble, all right? Even if you do all the right things, you can get into trouble here because it's more complex than Australia. Australia, you apply to ASIC, you get your company, you kick off, unless you're in a regulated industry. They say Vietnam law changes, but Vietnam law changes no more than any other law. I remember the amount of legal changes you need in Australia in relation to taxation occur on a daily basis. They're forever tweaking that system. They do the same here, all right? But there is a dedicated foreign investment system that's here, and you need to really look at those compliance changes and the regulations and how they work. There are certain restrictions on foreign ownership, as there are in Australia, all right? It's in relation to media, real estate and banking. There's limits to foreign ownership, and sometimes you require partners. Often though, you can actually do it on your own. And I would tell people, really, for a start, try and do it on your own. Taking on partners is in Australia or Vietnam is fraught with danger. So always consider that perspective to look at it. Intellectual property is weak, and you've got copyright risk, you've got all sorts of risks, but I noticed that the government is cracking down on things lately, particularly in relation to copyright. Oh wow, taxation and accounting, wow, what a system. It's paper-based contracts to even buy computers. All right, so you've got to go through contracts all the time. They're complex, they're written in Vietnamese, so you need to be very careful about how they're interpreted. There are frequent audits with little notice and penalties for non-compliance. And Vietnam sometimes have different standards to international standards. So you've got your international accounting standards that people need to adhere to, and that's one of the things that allows us to compare accounting systems across the world. Let's look at the next one, financial and banking challenges. Access to finance. There's a few businesses that are dedicated to foreign. I was able to open up BIDV. You also have HSBC, which you can do. You've got UOB, some of the overseas banks. But you're always in these issues around currency risk and how much you transfer money. Quite frankly, the easiest way I've found to transfer money is to go straight from my Australian bank to Wise and Wise to here. Often I can get better rates rather than going to two banks for the interbank rates. So you can really cop it in the neck when moving money from one country to another. Although Vietnam dong is stable, it's actually been going up a little bit. So Australian buying power is never better than what it is at the moment. So let's have a quick look at what it is today, because currency risk is a big one going from Australia today. So $1 Australian dollar today, it's gone up again, 17,434. So the charts are looking like it's an upward progression at the moment, but yeah, it's looking okay. So you can actually get good money. So if you've got your 25,000 a year in Australia, is looking pretty good in Vietnam. So it's probably ranging upwards of 35 million a month at the moment. Finding people. Oh, I tell you, this is a cracker. You start interviewing people for jobs and their resumes look amazing, but it's really hard to do resume checks here. And people often overstate the positions they've worked in before. It's really hard for an overseas person to then go back and check. I'd be using a firm to help me assist me to find labour, quite frankly, and there's lots and lots of good recruitment for us here. You need employment contracts as you do in Australia, the minimum wage, the social insurance, severance rules that you must carefully follow when hiring people. Employee turnover. I've had people email me in the middle of the night saying I'm resigning, and there's nothing you can do about it. They signed a contract, but getting people to do it, to cover off on it is difficult. You've really got to be careful in how you employ people. If we look at the next one, it's market and cultural challenges. This market is increasingly competitive, particularly in retail, manufacturing and services, and there's going to be no change in that. Consumer behaviour, difficult market to sell into. I've found it particularly difficult for a whole lot of things, and some people do it well, some don't. And look at some people at amazing businesses in Vietnam that have done well, and we're going to sort of promote those businesses over the coming months. Infrastructure and logistics, good port. Some people have a lot of challenges in relation to bringing stuff in. I've had one guy here who has a really good manufacturing business into Australia and the US. He wanted to move from China to here, found it very difficult to move here, and has in fact given up. So a big thing about moving here and starting a business is understanding that there might not be a business here for you. Don't try and force it. There are supply chain challenges, particularly with how the customs services work at the within the individual cities. We'll look at corruption and transparency. People talk about corruption here. Look, there's corruption all over the world. You can't tell me there's not. That sort of jobs for boys in Australia, and the way that the big business is actually looked after in Australia from that perspective. I tried bringing a bike in here, all right, and it took 3 months, and I paid for an overnight service on a plane, and then it took 3 months to get through customs for electronic push bike, because I'm a big unit. I needed a different type of bike. So bringing goods in can be difficult, and it's something you need to consider. I've been trying to buy Australian beer here. Virtually impossible to get beer in through the normal custom systems. So just a quick recap on that for everybody. Regulation and legal challenges you need to adhere to. I'll put all these up as a post soon. Taxation and accounting issues, financial and banking challenges, labour and human resources, market and cultural challenges, infrastructure and logistics, corruption and transparency are all things that you need to consider. Excuse me. If you need a hand with business, I offer a consulting service here that can help people. I do help people through the chamber, but I can't do a lot. It's the initial stages of introducing people to people that we do through the chamber. But if you want a detailed help with moving here, let me know. All right, thanks campers. Have a good one.